He, a philosopher who invented a Superman, was considered for a long time to be a proclaimer of amorality, cruelty, war, violence, and they considered him as a self-confident person possessed by megalomania. But his friends describe Friedrich Nietzsche thus: "One could easily not notice him. There was little attractiveness in his face. He had a habit of speaking softly, a careful, concentrated way of walking, calm features. He was conspicuous for politeness, almost female tenderness, and a permanently equable temper. He liked the refined manners of treating others, and he impressed his acquaintances by ceremoniousness." A German philosopher, Friedrich Nietzsche, was born in 1844 into a pastor's family who descended from the Polish nobility. At the age of 6, Friedrich was sent to a boys' school in the town of Naumburg, then to the Cathedral Gymnasium. A reserved and taciturn boy, he felt lonely and uncomfortable among his peers. His classmates called Fritz a little pastor and constantly made fun of his tender manners, polite tone, and for being unchildishly reasonable. His relationships with the pupils of the prestigious boarding school Schulpforta, where Nietzsche was admitted to as a gifted pupil at the age of 14, were not cordial. They were irritated by Friedrich's intellectual superiority, who not only composed verses and music, but was also interested in history and philosophy. At 18, Nietzsche wrote his first philosophical ethical essays, Fate and History, and Freedom of the Will and Fate. At the age of 20, Friedrich Nietzsche entered the geology department of the University of Bonn, but changed to the philology department after a year and continued his studies in Leipzig. Once he came across the work of Schopenhauer, The World as Will and Imagination. The philosopher's disdain for people with their petty worries and selfish interests shocked Friedrich enough to suffer from insomnia for 2 weeks. At 23, Nietzsche was called up for military service, but because of a serious trauma following an accident while being on horseback, he was pronounced unfit for active service, and Nietzsche returned to his studies. His scientific career was impetuous. In a year, the University of Basel invited him to teach classical philosophy, having awarded with a PhD degree without the dissertation presentation. In 1870, when the Franco-Prussian War broke out, Nietzsche decided to go to the front as a volunteer, but the neutral Swiss authorities allowed him only a service in the hospital. There he caught faucial diphtheria and dysentery. Only a miracle saved him, and he gave up the ideals of patriotism for good. On his return to the university, Friedrich combined teaching with his work on the first large philosophical essay, The Birth of Tragedy Out of the Spirit of Music. In 5 years, his health began to deteriorate drastically. In 1879, worn out and half-blind, Nietzsche, who had hardly reached the age of 35, sought permission to resign. For the next 10 years, he wandered about cheap holiday hotels. In summer, he was in Switzerland hotels, while in winter, in northern Italy ones. Where suffering from insomnia and headaches, he wrote his essays till his sore eyes failed. It was the time when his most significant philosophical works, Mixed Opinions and Maxims, The Gay Science, The Dawn, came out one after the other. His hopes for personal happiness did not come true. Having met Lou von Salome, a 20-year-old daughter of a Russian general, he decided to marry her. But this decision led to a serious misunderstanding with his mother and sister, as they considered his choice to be absolutely immoral. By 1888, Nietzsche had been completely cured of insomnia and bout of headaches, as well as the attacks of nausea that had tormented him for 15 years. But he started accomplishing inexplicable deeds. He broke off with his old friends. He created a fictitious autobiography. In January 1889, he became insane following an apoplectic stroke. The disease was violent. Friedrich sang songs all the time, irrespective of whether it was day or night, cried out incoherent words, jumped and bleated like a goat. He slept on the floor by the bed and had a voracious appetite. Only the flair for music did not desert. When he was seated at the piano, the keys under his hands did not produce a single false note. Towards the end of 1900, he contracted pneumonia and died peacefully in an Italian mental hospital in Turin. Not only Nietzsche's life, but also the fate of his legacy met with a tragic fate. After Friedrich's death, his sister published his works, having totally distorted the content. Militarists proclaimed Nietzsche their philosopher. His works were taught at German gymnasia, and young men who were going to the front had the work Thus Spoke Zarathustra by Nietzsche next to the Bible and Faust by Goethe. In the 1930s, the philosopher was turned into an idol of Nazism. They forgot that speaking about the Superman, Nietzsche meant not a dictator, but a thinker, an artist, squeezing drop by drop the slavish morality out of himself. And his phrase, "push the falling one," is not about relationships between people, but about the fall of epochs, states, traditions, and customs, about everything that becomes incapable of living and has to be pushed towards an abyss. Otherwise, the process of decay will drag on.